Chapter 14. Real History. Observing his sergeant negotiating their ride to Afghanistan with her German acquaintance after surprising him outside his apartment building, Drex was more thankful than ever that he had placed Spears on the team. After driving non-stop for a little more than 9 hours, ensuring each person had an opportunity to rest, Drex and Otto kept watch from the other side of the street. This was always Drex's favorite time of the day, right before sunlight began breaking over the horizon and pushing back the darkness. Taking in a deep breath, he savored the crisp air filling his lungs. "Drex, we have to move," Otto said in a soft enough tone to prevent his voice from traveling down the empty early morning streets. They walked casually down the street to where Spears stood. As soon as they were close enough to hear her without her raising her voice, Spears updated them on their transportation. Shaking her head slightly, she started, "That is one upset Kraut. He's flying 2 trucks and other boxed supplies to Bagram Air Base. The thing is, he said he wanted no part in this." "No part in this?" Drex growled. Hearing his tone and feeling the frustration behind it, Spears rushed to add, "But the trucks are running late on a train that will be passing through soon. He wants no part in what we are doing, but he won't be checking inside the transport after the trucks are loaded." "I know where these tracks are located. We must hurry." Before he had even finished speaking, Otto was on the move. Just behind him, Drex and Spears followed, keeping a close eye on their surroundings, especially when rounding corners. Drex had seen how little time was required for machines in black suits to take control of people, and still without green-tinted sunglasses, he was not taking any chances, even with Otto in the lead. After a few blocks, they cut down a narrow alleyway between 2 old buildings that appeared not to have been used in decades. Exiting the other end, they faintly saw a large open space full of tracks. "Now we wait," Otto addressed Drex and Spears while each of them listened for the sounds of trains approaching. Little less patient than the others, Drex walked out to the tracks and bent over to press his ear to the cold steel. At first, he heard nothing. Then, his eyes widened as he clearly heard a rumbling in the steel. A big, goofy grin stretched across his face at the realization that the trick had actually worked, but he wiped it off his face before he stood up and faced the others. "Here!" he called out, waving them over. "How do you know to do that?" Otto asked. "Boy Scouts," Drex replied. He wasn't about to tell the German commando that he'd really only seen it done in a couple of movies. "Well, I'm not sure how many trains you two have snuck on, but they still have conductors watching the tracks up ahead. If they see us standing here, that'll be the end of the line." Spears suppressed a smirk at her own use of railroad lingo. Looking around, they could find little to conceal them. Hoping there was still enough darkness to obscure their outlines, they each lowered to the ground, lying along the tracks running parallel to the approaching train. They lay motionless with as many natural objects as possible between them and the conductor. Drex was the first to spot the light from an approaching train. "Get ready! Here it comes!" For some reason in his mind, Drex imagined they would have to run in order to board, but as it took 15 minutes to travel the short distance, that thought quickly changed. Rising to his feet as the engine slowly passed his position, Drex looked back and saw the others follow. This should be easy, he thought as the train cars passed with one carrying German military trucks approaching. "Great! They have covers on them!" Otto shouted over the clanking of the train. Without replying, Drex was the first to grab hold of the chains binding the large truck to the train, quickly pulling himself up, and one after another, the other 2 did the same. Already running late, the train was swiftly unloaded of supplies needed for the flight to Afghanistan. Drex, Otto, and Spears remained silent and motionless where they had wedged themselves between boxed cargo already in the truck. Fortunately, everyone was so rushed that little attention was paid to what the cargo was but a great deal when it came to securing it for flight. After what they thought was the fastest loading job ever witnessed, they were airborne heading to Afghanistan. Having listened for sounds of crew members talking or moving about for the last half hour and hearing none, Drex felt it was safe to relax. He slowly made his way to the truck's rear and peered over its tailgate, seeing nothing but a second truck loaded onto the plane. Watching for movement as he climbed down from the tall truck, Drex was ready to neutralize any crew member he spotted. "There isn't anyone back here, sir." Slightly startled by Spears's announcement at such a loud volume, Drex slowly turned his head to where Spears stood on the truck. "How do you know?" "Oh, sorry, sir. Garrett said his crew hardly ever came back here during flight," Spears informed him, now feeling sheepish for not saying something sooner. Even though it was information he could have used earlier, Drex was just happy to be on a flight that would take hours to get there rather than by sea, which would have been at minimum a week's travel. "Okay, it's a long flight, so let's stay in this area in case someone does come back to check on things. While we do, I think we should get to know each other better. How about it, Otto?" Knowing that this time was coming, Otto had been preparing himself from the time he had received the mission. "Colonel Jake Guerrero," or Master Sergeant Guerrero, Drex added, followed by Otto raising his hand to Drex, just as he had done to him earlier that day while making their escape. Otto continued, "Master Sergeant is his cover. He is really Colonel Jake Guerrero with the HDC Human Defense Coalition." "Human Defense Coalition? Never heard of it." Drex's voice strained from exhaustion, just a minor physical representation of the frustration and disbelief he had for the last 24 hours. "If you will allow me to finish, I can explain," Otto stated while looking to first Spears, then to Drex to agree before continuing. Spears nodded without hesitation, and Drex reluctantly did, wanting to get answers more than he wanted to speak freely. "This is the briefing originally planned for your team yesterday. The world you believed you were part of does not exist. Mankind lost control of its destiny in the 1930s, when research into nuclear fusion first began activating what is now known as the Black Knight satellite. It was placed in orbit by the Norcocks. After some unexplained reason, they left their research station in Earth's orbit and our solar system over 12,000 years ago." Otto paused, then looked to Spears, who was shaking in her attempt to remain silent and refrain from asking a question. Picking up on Otto's signal, Spears sighed with relief and asked, "How come we've never found this station circling overhead?" "We have, and you have seen it almost every day of your life. The moon." Otto was amazed at how well Drex was accepting the information he was presenting. Spears, on the other hand, looked as though she could ask 1,000 questions on just information provided up till now, so he would allow her one more before continuing. He nodded at her, motioning for her to ask just one more. "So, they have a base on the moon?" Spears asked cautiously. "This is the last question till end of my briefing. No, the moon is their station. Meine Freundin, you should know with your obvious intellect that Earth does not have enough mass to hold a moon of that size in orbit, much less one in perfect orbit with only one side always facing Earth." Spears' eyes widened at this revelation, but she did not interrupt again. Now, since receiving information from the Black Knight satellite regarding nuclear testing, the Norcocks have returned. They were unconcerned with our bucket weapons, but that all changed with the first detonation starting our nuclear age. Since then, mankind slowly lost control of Earth as the Norcocks secretly took over all major governments with the exception of one, Russia. United States was first to become controlled with Britain, Germany, and France close behind. Since then, mankind has been manipulated into endless wars. It seems the only interest they truly have is keeping mankind battling each other and finding these crystals your team was sent to retrieve. Unfortunately, that's not all. The most valuable commodities in the galaxy are our body's production of insulin and proteins. Many alien races produce drugs from these called zyme. As it appeared that Otto was finished, Drex asked, "How does your father connect to this?" "Herr Drex, that is why I am here today. It was my father that once told me of help they received for a short period of time. During a trip to Antarctica, a research team discovered a strange cylinder slightly exposed under the ice. After recovering it and shipping it back to a lab in Germany, They studied it extensively for years, but did not have any results. That was till Otto von Czerny, my father, opened the metallic cylinder, revealing a Norcox in very poor condition. The creator spent only a few weeks outside the cylinder, where it had survived for thousands of years before succumbing to a brain aneurysm. During that time, scientists gathered a great deal of knowledge in an attempt to save the being. But technology of those days proved to be inadequate, Otto explained, as he looked around for something to eat and drink in the cargo boxes. "We can't dig through the cargo. It will give us away when we arrive," Drex said, even though he had thought about doing the same thing. "No, it would look suspicious if nothing had been opened. Things go missing on these United Nations supply runs all the time. It is simply expected," Otto respectfully informed Drex. Spears, who was already eating a nutrition bar she had retrieved from one of many cargo boxes, jokingly asked, "What about this protein bar? It has 13 grams of protein. What's that worth on a galactic market?" With sadness in his eyes and tugging at the corners of his lips, Otto replied, "Nothing. They can synthesize protein, but that which other races want comes from human fat and organs." Spears continued chewing on her nutrition bar, even with thoughts of humans being harvested and sold for their meat throughout the galaxy bombarding her mind. How do they get away with that? Liposuction, amputations, war, abductions, even embalming the dead, which serves no purpose, but people are led to believe is necessary. The more fat on a person when they die, the better. This is why everything has sugar added, and people are encouraged to drink it from a can. Drex had listened to enough of Otto and Spears go on about people being sold as meat. The churning in his stomach agreed with him. "What about this HDC? Where are they based, and what is their purpose?" Otto refocused, having found himself trapped in conversation with only Spears. "Well, like I said, there is only one major country not controlled by the Norcox, Russia. Though the majority of our research takes place there, we have bases all around the globe. You may have heard of Area 51? Guess I should have expected that, Drex thought before saying with a hint of sarcasm, "Yes, I think the world knows about that base." "Well, what you don't know is that it has an extensive underground network and labs hidden from even those in the U.S. government. Remind me to tell you about the Horyu-G later, but for now the mission." Great. More secrets, Drex couldn't help but think. He had never cherished the feeling of being kept out of the loop, and he'd just about reached his limit on it since entering this mission. Otto continued, "The HDC was created shortly after creation of the CIA in 1947, which was merely a Norcox organization to begin their manipulation of our world through use of their halflings. The organization didn't really begin till President Eisenhower created Project Blue Book. That is when everything began to change, and we have been searching for a way to be rid of our controllers ever since. We even regained control of the United States government with election of Kennedy till he was assassinated in 1963. Since then, we have worked covertly as a second government throughout 32 nations. As I like to tell people, there is history that has been written, and there is the history that is." Otto felt that he had answered Drex's question to the fullest, only to find that there would be no rest for the remaining flight. Instead, it was full of questions and discussions with both of his companions. Questions like, what are halflings? Or